Hi guys, Hengist here from House of Hengist Comics and welcome back to the channel. I hope you're doing well, and we're back in Norway for the last game in the south, which I've entitled the Mines of Moria. The news, well, that is as it was in our last episode. However, we have Oslo fully under occupation, and I think many of the Norwegians are now receiving news, those in the outlying area, that Norway's actually been attacked and subdued. The German General High Staff are extremely happy with the progress. And let's look at the forces for today. This comprises of 142nd Brigade, which is going to be 4 infantry platoons. Some have been brought back, some are depleted. They've got 2 mortars. They've also got 25-pound battery in support as they had in the night attack last time. But they've also got a firestorm unit of British mountaineers. These will prove quite crucial in the game coming up. We've also got the German forces themselves. Once again, it's elements of the 354th Battalion, which will be defending Narvik, who are compelled to fall back under General Headquarters orders, and are now dug in on top of a very steep hill, very close by a mine shaft. The Germans again are confident trained, the British are all confident trained, but the Germans have mortars, but not much else. They lost pieces in the last battle. We're using Achtung Panzer rules, and without further ado, let's get into the mission today, because it's an interesting one. Once again, the British have chosen to go at night. It certainly favoured them in the last battle. The terrain, it's a little bit different now. We're not into an urban environment, we're into the country with very high mountains, and we use Google Maps to try and get an indication of where we are and what we're using. We then try and replicate that terrain as I've discussed in previous videos. As you can see, there's a lot of scree lines which only mountaineers can enter, as I explained in the last video. And this is a very long hill. It's nearly 8 feet long, it's extremely steep, over 1 meter high, and we've got a fixed objective here on the left flank, which is basically the mine itself, Dria's mine shaft, I think it is. Again, a historical picture we've taken. There's also the cabin where the workers are. That is the only building on this site. We've got the cave itself, and frankly, God knows what's in it, which is why I've entitled it the Mines of Moria, so to speak. Let's look at the 3 objectives. We've got the central one. The mine is on the right flank, and then we've got the left flank objective here. Effectively, the mine is a fixed objective, whilst the other 2 are placed by the players. Let's now take a closer look at the deployment. The Germans effectively camp grouped again, making 4 platoons, attaching 2 heavy machine guns to 1 platoon on the far left flank. They've also basically had that objective removed once it was deployed, obviously the heavy machine guns being a threat. In the centre we have the 1IC, and around the objective itself, and we're looking down on the British, who've massed on their left flank and are preparing to make a company assault against this position. Let's look at the night moves now. We roll a stormtrooper move, effectively a skill check to see how they can move forward, and then we've got a recon move. And before we know it, effectively, the British are on the German position. So without further ado, let's get into the battle action. Well, this was an absolute corker. And basically we start the game with the first deck card being drawn, which produces fantastic fog, which basically limits visibility down to 6 inches. Immediately the scouts are under pressure. The British immediately launch an assault with the Yorkshiremen. They basically assault, moving everything else up really quickly, and before we know it, the British are in with bayonets and hand grenades. The scouts are completely flummoxed, try and fight, fail to counter-attack in terms of getting hits, an automatic counter-attack back by the British, who proceed to systematically destroy them. However, a second platoon had been triggered. They counter-attacked and fought a really bloody battle straight away in the fog, in the cold, and effectively were compelled to withdraw. There were, at this point, probably about 40 men dead immediately. The Germans were in real panic. They they were uncertain. They'd lost their energetic officer, captured by another energetic officer. And as the Germans tried to get themselves together, they then drawed another card, which effectively meant we had 2 full turns. And this reduced it to 16 visibility. We had double concealment in, and they'd ambushed, immediately as well. So the flak guns were of no real use. The Germans are now desperately trying to get over to their right flank, where the pressure is mounting on the left. And it is looking really, really dangerous and precarious already. We've had literally 20 minutes of combat time. The British are pouring up that hill. They're making their displacement or stormtrooper moves really, really well. And they're closing in with the mountaineers leading straight up the scree line and coming over the ridge, really, to a flummoxed German position. They've got their flak there, but before they know it, even with the double concealment, there's loads of fire going down, but no casualties. Panic from the flak commander, doesn't know what to do, and before he can react, he effectively is overrun, butchered, and basically the position is effectively taken. The mountaineers then fall back into the rocks where they can, but the rocks at the summit they couldn't basically get all their troops onto it. The Germans then thought, right, we better counterattack, and immediately launched a counterattack. This, as everything else is pouring up that ridgeline, it's really, really knicker-gripping stuff, so to speak. The Germans counterattack, but again had an appalling round in which effectively they lost 5 bases in close assault. That left them with their 1 IC. Although the mountaineers, the British mountaineers, were ultimately broken in a motivation test, the 1 IC was dead. That platoon was wiped out, and there was practically nothing around the minefield except mortars. We'd had no real fire from artillery until just at that moment the 25-pounders spotted an opportunity and opened fire. They pinned a platoon where effectively we see the Lincolns race up. They then basically went in with the grenade, small arms and bayonet and proceeded to smash into. But this was the critical turning point. They failed the counterattack, and that allowed the Germans to start stormtroopering across. In fact, the Kampfgruppe on the left had already been moving, and what was then, we were looking at about 70 or 80 dead already on the hill. The 2 IC was in charge of the Kampfgruppe, couldn't take really a leading role as the British again pushed up remorselessly without pressure and managed to occupy the mine, which was the objective itself. Fortunately, the Germans had a couple of bases, what was left of the platoon on the right flank, and desperately tried to fight. There was lots of mortar fire now from the Germans because they'd got their command team up to spot, and then we got daybreak, and this basically brought the game to a really nerve-shattering point. The British launched down the slope, but the Germans managed to get their hits, and this time managed to pin them. Without their double concealment, where they'd benefited from so many saves, now it was daylight, and the Stukas came in. They hit one of the remnant platoons from the first assault, pinned it, but did no more really that day. It was one attack, and that was it. And effectively at this position, the British then refused to move out. The heavy machine guns were now moving over, the mortars were firing at them. But the Germans weren't in a position to counterattack or do anything either. They had lost so many men, and the risk of moving forward and taking on the British with that re-roll in that British Bulldog, the counterattack, was just too much. They'd lost too many men, and the commander was quite shaken at the damage that had been done. The British, effectively, the Lincolns basically dug in behind the summit, but in the end, ultimately, it really sort of stalemated. It was catastrophic for both sides, really, and effectively the umpire ruled it a draw. However, as we go into the postscript and we examine what happened in that battle in a little bit more detail, effectively the British High Command had ordered that the British forces withdraw, and so many prisoners of war were taken. Obviously, there were commendations for the German infantry, but they were really shell-shocked and shaken at this attack. Higher command didn't seem to be that concerned. As far as the Führer was concerned, everything in the south had gone according to tactics, although the command officers in the south have suddenly gone quiet and disappeared to Oslo, whilst Trondheim, the German jackboot, has occupied it. And ultimately, we're left in a situation where basically the British are now really on retreat in the south, but in the north are about to strike. Major MacDonald's looking very terrified there. The Gebirgsjäger are getting ready for an onslaught, I can assure you. They may be making some tactical moves and adjustments, but that will be coming up. In the meantime, we've got a game coming up which is about the sea supply to Narvik. That should be really exciting, and stay tuned for that. And of course, we've got so much more coming from Norway. So from me and the gang, best wishes, and it's over and out for me.